great to meet you. Again, I love the album, so thank you so much for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today.
Sure thing.
So before we get into full steam ahead, I want to know first and foremost, 5 years ago, this pandemic was changing everything,
Right.
doing very specific things to the artistic music community. How did you get through it, and how has it changed the way that you approach music and do things today?
Well, basically, we conferred, Don Hales, Carrie, and I, and we decided to keep going, in rehearsal situations and developed a whole lot of material over that time. And then on the other, the other thing that I do, I do rock. Between well up to this year, I put out two releases. A more prog rock one that with a lot of material that had accumulated over the years, and then the new jazz organ one. So I would say that the way I dealt with it, with the boredom and all that kind of thing, is I wrote a lot of music and transcribed a lot of things, and yeah, I've always had an active trio and quartet. And during that time, I also developed a book of tribute to Charles Erland, and that's reflected on the CD with Illumination, and that, and it was a slow time, and we kept as active as we could, within the legalities of all of that,
Yeah.
and I don't think I played a club date for about a year and a half. Some of the clubs started opening up maybe a little bit prematurely, and then there were cancellations. And so Carrie and Don and I just decided, let's wait until this all washes out, for the all clear. So that's pretty much how we dealt with it.
So talk to me about this new album, Full Steam Ahead. What was the over what was the overarching vision for this album, and how good does it feel that it's out there?
Well, it's I always take a lot of time with arrangements and that kind of thing. And I hadn't put out a release since 2015, a late one with Summit. And time kind of got away from us. I mean, we were gigging a lot, and I just decided to sit down. And Tony Monaco has always worked very closely with me, on pre-production. At this point, it's more, these selections sound good, and I would maybe send him some rehearsal tapes and that kind of stuff. And I always, I don't like to say that there's a formula, but there's kind of an old school thought with jazz organ um, that Tony shared with me, is that have a nice mix of things. I mean, of course, the standards, and something Latin, maybe funk, a ballad, that kind of thing. So when I sit down to actually hone down the tune list, I take those things into consideration, and then also, include some original compositions from myself. And Don's a very active writer too, so that's kind of how uh, the first plan was for that. And then we have a recording studio here at our home. Now, my first two releases were done at Tony Monaco's studio, and I just sent him something in probably late 2014, because he had moved, and he still does studio stuff, but he had moved a little out of town. He's back in town now, and he thought the quality was good on our recording end, and so we've done that ever since. With him doing mastering on the back end of it. So
So what are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
well, I kind of like to appeal to not just the people that are already listening to jazz.
Yeah.
Do a little bit of crossover with that. Now, you know, I don't feel at this point that I'd want to put out a totally original album. I know when I look to buy a release myself, I like to see how organists deal with standards and that kind of thing. And I do just hope that it appeals to maybe some people that are maybe more casual jazz listeners, but also people that are, more hardcore, for lack of a better term, concerning listening to jazz.
So take me back to your roots, your origins. Where were you born and raised, and how did music become your life?
Well, I was raised in Holmes County, Ohio, which is in the middle of Amish country. Okay, right. Millersburg is the county seat. Our closest cities were Canton, Akron, Dover, New Philadelphia, where I did my first gigs, joined the union there. I'm still a member of the AFM, but I had to join the union to play in a concert band there. And somebody had to sign for me too. I think I was only 17, and I was playing in the percussion section. But going back to the organ things, um, my parents, they're not really musicians, although, dad had some experience in the school band, maybe playing in the percussion section, and mom took some piano lessons, but very casually. But during that time, it was kind of a status symbol to have a really nice stereo system in your house. And, they, had a very large record collection, especially for people that, weren't really active musicians. And, I just started listening to music so much all the time. I mean, I almost preferred that to television, even as a kid. I'm still the same way. But I think, they noticed that I really had enough interest. And then one day, this truck showed up from Sears, and there was an organ in that, and it was a little silver tone. Now, it wasn't a chord organ, but it had a pedal board, but two manuals and small, it was a little reduced. So I took lessons on that organ for probably maybe about 4 years. And I started when I was 6, and it was all the Mary Had a Little Lamb stuff, and I kind of had a casual interest in that. And then I probably might have been a few months where I didn't take lessons, and my teacher had moved out of town. She was a high school student, and so my folks looked for another teacher, and I ended up with these two brothers that lived in Dover, Ohio, and they were supper club organists, and their names were Phil Petro and Dave Petro, and they had a Lowry dealership. So I started taking lessons there, and it was just different. They were kind of teaching me how to read lead sheets, and I didn't really realize this. And it was all the tunes of the late '60s, early '70s. Playing Jimmy Webb, but really simplified versions. But they taught me chord language, and then we ended up buying a Lowry organ from them, and I stuck with that for a while. And then I heard the Hammond. Probably the first recordings I heard was Oya Como Va by Santana, and then Steppenwolf, Born to Be Wild, those kinds of things. All those that particular recording is on a Lowry, believe it or not. I knew Goldie McJohn a little bit just through internet. I never met him, but we had talked on the phone a time or two, and just a real pleasant guy. So those were really my first influences. And then a friend of mine who was not a musician, she was a little older. Her parents and my parents played cards a lot on Sunday afternoons, and so she wasn't quite babysitting us, me and my sisters, but she was maybe 3, 4 years older. It's like, I got to do something with these little kids, and she had a copy of Fragile by Yes, and her parents had just gotten a new stereo system for her, and she put it on, and I was like, I had the 45 of Roundabout or whatever. I had bought that, and she put this on, and I was like, wow, and she apologized. She says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, the songs are too long." I said, "No, no, no, it's okay," And then we listened to side one, and she flipped it over to side two, and I looked at the album cover, and I saw Rick Wakeman. It's like, well, what are all these things? I don't know what a mellotron is. I don't know what a moog is, or I mean, I probably said moog at that time,
Yeah.
looking at the spelling of it, and so I kind of shifted over into more of that prog rock thing, and stuck with it. And so subscribed to Downbeat. We'd have magazine sales at school, and it's. I asked mom and dad, well, can we buy a couple too? We had to sell them for fundraisers, and I thought Downbeat looked interesting, so I subscribed to Downbeat when I was about 11 or 12. I didn't know who any of these people were until I started. Well, Buddy Rich I had seen on the Tonight Show, and these were all new names to me, and I would just read them, and it's like, well, that's kind of cool. And then I started seeing Maynard Ferguson on PBS specials. And it's like, oh, wow, well, okay. So it was just that kind of stuff, just little unrelated things that happened. And, when I was about 12 or 13, I thought, I think I'd like to be a musician, but, how can I do that? And I took interest in music education. I mean, I ended up getting a degree in music education. Is actually a Bachelor of Jazz Performance with the Ohio certification, and did a lot of teaching in the schools for quite a while. And then I ended up, doing some adjunct college later. But it's just been kind of in my blood ever since I was a little kid, and I didn't know how it would turn out, but I always had an interest in it. And I think other than for maybe 6 months of my first, when I was first teaching school, I just was so busy and overwhelmed. Is the only time in my life since I was 17 or 18 years old where I didn't gig. And I've always kept something going. Um, I'm pretty cross genre kind of a person. I mean, my main thing is jazz, and then I would say, the rock things, and I also play drums. I came up through the school band, playing drums and percussion, and that's actually what my degrees are in. Okay, Capital University, and then I went to Ohio State, where I met my husband Kerry. We were both the graduate assistants for the late Dr. James L. Moore, who was very groundbreaking in the Percussive Arts Society. And just to quote unquote legitimize percussion. It's not just banging on things. I mean, there's a lot to it, and so I hope that answers your
It
question.
does. It certainly does. And after all of this time, what do you like the best about being a professional musician? What motivates you to love what you do every day?
Well, it's the creative thing. I mean, it's just creative, and seeing the audience response. Um, it's kind of a humbling thing too, because when I was a kid, it was you'd read about Led Zeppelin and their big jet and all this kind of stuff, and I mean that kind of stuff doesn't really exist anymore. But I think for me when I was a kid, it was more kind of like, wow, I mean, I really want to be famous, but yeah, I mean, sort of, kind of. And then the MTV thing started up, and all of a sudden, prog rock was like out of favor. And that's really when I started to play in the early 80s, as far as playing in bands. I remember there was one, for instance, when I was about 15. Um, there was these two older guys. I mean, they were in their early 20s, and they knew I played Hammond, and had an audition at the house. And there was another fella. I'm still in touch with him, a guy named Dan Jones. I think he was in that thing. He local musician from around New Philadelphia, and they wanted me in the band, and my mom and dad were not didn't object to it, but we sat and we talked. He said, something, Linda. He said, Dad said, I don't mind you playing clubs, but why don't you wait until you can at least drink beer legally? All right. So it was kind of a thing where I wasn't real disappointed in that. And my parents, wonderful parents, very supportive. But I thought that was just good common sense. And so I didn't really, do that until I was of legal age.
So, what was the first live show you saw? What was the first live show that blew you away that made you think, I want to do that one day?
Okay. Well, one of my band directors took us to see Stan Kenton at one of the local colleges. And I didn't meet Stan. I mean, this was toward the end of his life, but it was up at Ashland College, which is called Ashland University now. And I snuck a recorder in there. I think those tapes still work. I have to check down in the basement. But the thing is that at that time I'd already seen Maynard Ferguson on television. You know, I was very excited about that. But just to sit there in the room, and it wasn't a thing so much that I was thinking about, oh, I'd like to be like Stan Kenton, or I'd like to be like Gary Hobbs, or whatever. It was more just that incredible, huge sound that the band had. I mean, it almost knocked you out of your seat. And I mean, I've always been more drawn to that kind of music, exciting things. I mean, I like ballads and I like different things, but like the stuff that really grabs me is something that's like up tempo clip, loud, those kinds of things. And there ain't anything louder than Stan Kenton's brass section. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. You're in different genres. You're an educator, family, friends, students, fans, everyone on the bandstand, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, that's kind of hard to say. As far as how I run my stuff. Now, I've been a side musician a lot too, and when I was just doing that, I would get a little bit frustrated because I sing some, but not really. I mean, I'll do more background. So I always felt like I was more at the mercy of a list of songs of everybody else. I just kind of fit in there and learn my parts, and I'm a team player in that. But kind of got to a point where it's like, I'm starting to feel a little burned out, and I need to, maybe take a leadership position in bands. And so I did start the organ band. That was the first organ band that I had was right around 99, 2000. Okay. And, on my background pick here, that's my, one of my Hammonds, that's my B2 Hammond with the 147 Leslie, and that never leaves the house. I learned on that organ ever since I was like 12 years old. That's my first Hammond. And then I have three gig Hammonds. I have an A100 and a B3. And then I'm also endorsed the XK3C from the Hammond Organ USA company. And I've had that about 15 years. I've not upgraded it. I mean, it's a good piece of equipment until it wears out. I probably won't. But I just decided that maybe it's time for me to be a band leader. Okay, and not run it like Napoleon or whatever. Have people put input in and all that kind of stuff. But that kind of gave me another surge because I was starting to feel a little bit burned out, being at the mercy of everybody picking music for me to play, and me not having a whole lot of say in it. Although I get a few tunes there, but yeah, I played a lot of music to pay the bills. That I mean, I'm kind of like, if I don't play some of those songs again, I really don't care.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If anybody wants to get full steam ahead, any of your other catalog, catch you live in various incarnations, any of the good business, where do they go?
Okay, we have a website where we are selling hard product. It's www.dachtyl, spelled DACHTYL.com.
Okay.
Now, and that's where I have my personal sales of the CDs. I've finished pretty much for 2025 my club dates. Okay, we did one last Saturday with bluesman Sean Carney, and I work as a side musician with him quite a bit, in addition to some of the other things that I do. And every December, Carrie and I kind of make a shift, a little bit out of the clubs. We do a lot of church music. Okay, I don't. I have one pipe organ thing that I'm doing, although it's just playing hymns in that. for an Anglican church as a sub. But we work as percussionists a lot, either together or sometimes separate. He has the gig down at St. Joseph Cathedral. He's the timpanist, and then I play for St. Paul's in Westerville, which is a suburb here. So we kind of make that shift out of there. And I do have one nice Christmas gig, quote unquote, coming up with the ladies of Longford, and very nice people, Hilda Doyle, Stephanie Doyle, and Heather Doyle, her daughters, who just happened to be some of my students when I was in Catholics, teaching Catholic school. It's just funny how all this stuff connects. And I'll start calendar up probably in February. I'm still working on bookings. I have some for next year already. They're quite in advance. I've got a September thing that I'm doing with the Charles Erlin Tribute Band, and it's actually at a local Lutheran church. Erlin had an awful lot of titles, spiritual titles, especially toward the end of his life, and there's enough there. The minister, he saw us play at the Columbus Jazz Rib Fest this past summer, and I just wrote to different churches to see who might be interested, and he's doing that, and then I've got active calendar out at Buckeye Lake Resort next summer with the Roxy Janes. In fact, one of the Roxy Janes, Gayla Smith, was the artist of the album, and my mainstay around here is a little club called Dick's Den. Okay, it's been in business for maybe 60 years. It's nothing fancy. It's a nice bar just north of the Ohio State University campus, and it's a music lovers club. I can play anything in there that I want, and that and get paid for it. That's nice too. But I'll probably have again, a lot of jobs at Dick's Den. Some of the other local clubs I've played. There's a new one called the Ginger Rabbit. Very, very nice club, and the Erlin bands played there. We had 4 shows. We sold all of them out. So there is quite an interest. But right now, I'm just getting 2026 calendar going.
Sounds wonderful. So great to catch up with you. Thank you so much again for taking a minute out today. Best of luck with the album and all the pursuits. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. And before